Hi, this is Robin, and the title of this workshop is Relight Photos in Photoshop with No 3D Filters, and it will be part 1. 2 years ago, I published a 2-part video set also titled How to Relight Photos in Photoshop. You can find it in the lighting series or playlist on my channel. The workflows I demonstrated back then used Photoshop's 3D lighting effects filters. What happened was in mid-2024, Adobe removed all 3D features and engine from Photoshop. But if you got and kept Photoshop Release 22.2 when I published those videos, you can still work with the 3D lighting filters I demonstrated back then. If you don't have Release 22.2 or an earlier Photoshop CC release that had the 3D features, you cannot install it now. It's no longer downloadable. So in this workshop, based on some requests from some of my viewers, I'm going to show how to relight images in Photoshop without the Photoshop 3D engine. Each workflow is separate, and I will include links to the start times for each of the relighting effect demos in the description below, so you can skip around. You do not have to do them in a specific order. And I'm going to take a quick drink because it's really dry here today. Hold on. Okay, so the 3 lighting effects that I'm going to show step-by-step demos for in this part 1 video include directional light, lens flares, and a lit light bulb effect. So just quickly to show you some of how it will look after you get finished or similar. This one is the directional lighting, so you can see it's as if the sun is shining on this vase. The second demo will be the lens flare effect, so you can see how up at the top of that image we've created a lens flare. And then the final demo, the third demo, will be a lit and glowing light bulb effect, so like lighting up lanterns that previously had nothing but clear glass here. So those are the 3 demos that we're going to do in this video. In a separate updated part 2 workshop, I'll also feature workflows for making a spotlight effect, both with and without the volumetric dust particles effects, as well as how to create faux cast shadows. If you're adding light to scenes, you're going to need shadows to go with the lighting that you're adding. So in that part 2, I'll also show you a way to create shadows. So I'm going to pause for just a moment and get set up for demo number 1, which will be the directional lighting effects. So hold on. All right, this is demo number 1, and in demo number 1, we're going to create directional light. This is the approach that will replace the old Photoshop 3D infinite lighting effect. And I'm going to be working with this stock photo here of yellow flowers in a white vase, and I got this from Unsplash. I will try to include links to the stock photos that I do use in case you want to try them before working with your own images. Now, this directional light effect is going to simulate light that's cast from a source, such as the sun, and that shines in a specific direction or plane. So since this stock image already had some light on it and a shadow already in it, we're going to be adding directional light that comes from left to right to mimic that directional light. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is you obviously have to open up your image into Photoshop, and then over in the layers panel you'll have the background layer. We want to work on a copy, so use Control or Command J to jump up a copy of that, or left click and drag to the bottom of the layers panel to the add new layer icon, which is that box with the plus, and then you get this copy here. Now, just so you know where I'm working, if you're not familiar with my videos, my layers panel is up here at the upper right, properties panel at the lower right, and I have my toolbar docked right for convenient access. Okay. All right, now that we have the copy, what we want to do is on this active highlighted layer, we want to add a screen blend mode. So here in the layers panel where it says normal as the default, come to the little down arrow to reveal the other blend modes, and we're going to add screen. So right there, left click. So now you can see the screen blend mode, it brightens. It's brightened up the entire image. But we don't want that because we want to control where the brightness is. So we want to add a black mask to the same layer to hide what we just added. So come to the bottom of the layers panel to the add layer mask icon, which is that box with the circle. Press and hold the Alt or Option key and then click on that icon, that add new layer mask icon, and you'll see it has added a black mask, and the black mask is active because it's got the white frame around it. So now we're back to where we started from. Black mask hides, white reveals or shows. Okay, so that's what we wanted, is to hide that brightness and bring it back selectively. All right, so what we're going to do that is, first of all, be sure your black mask is active, and that's what you're working on. We're going to work with the gradient tool. So on your toolbar, you come down to the gradient icon, which looks like it's going from dark to light. Left click, be sure there's black around it to show that it's active. And every tool in the toolbar has specific options or settings associated with it. So we want to set up some of the options that are associated with the gradient. So this is the options bar across the top of the interface. So let's just go across and see what we have to be set at for this effect. So first of all, you have a choice next to the word gradient here. Click that down arrow. We want to work with the new gradient and not the classic gradient. So that's good. Next, you come over and we want to choose a gradient preset. And for this effect, we want to be working with the foreground to background gradient. So again, click on the little down arrow, and you should be able to hover, and hopefully it shows you which is which. There we go. It says foreground to background. So I'm going to left click on that very first upper left gradient, and that's what we're going to work for this effect. Then we keep coming over even more, and the next thing we want to do is choose the type of gradient. So the first little box here is linear. We want to come to the second from the left, which is the radial gradient. So left click on that. Okay, and then we are also going to lower the opacity just a little bit, so we'll leave the mode where it is. And oh, well, actually it's on a pretty good thing. So I think I will, typically it would be up at 100% as the default, but I think I want to leave mine more a 90 to 95, just so it's not too intense. Maybe I'll do 95. Okay, I'll do 96. It's in that range. And then I think for now I'll click off reverse. We'll see if we want to change that. All right, so now what we want to do is click and drag into the image to put the beam of light that we want to have as directional light. So I'm going to click outside of the image, and I'm trying to sort of mimic this angle that this light is already showing at. So I'll click out here somewhere and drag. Okay, so I'm just pulling into the scene. Okay, and we're going to assume there's a window over here that's casting this light. Let me move that. Now this is so big, it's hard to see what we're doing. So what I want to do is make this so it's more visible inside the box we're working with. So I'm going to press Control or Command and 0, and that will fit this more to the scene that we have, or the box that we have here, so we can see what we are doing. All right, so I'm going to click on this little white handle here and pull down so it's a more narrow beam, and you can make it as narrow or as wide as you want by clicking and pulling on that for your directional light. You can click on the white handle here, and move it in and out. Okay. You can click on the black and move that in it. So if you're watching the image, look, so as I come in more, there's less of the brightness. If I pull it out more, there's more of the brightness. Okay. So I probably want more brightness here and more shadow there. And then we can also work with this little diamond that's on this bar here. And if you watch the image again as I'm doing this, so I'm just clicking on that diamond and dragging it. I'm using a mouse and just dragging it. And if you watch the tablecloth, you'll see it affects how much the image is affected. I think for mine, I'm going to make it, again, just a little narrower beam. Well, actually, I might make it a little wider because then I can get some of the flowers in there too. There we go. Okay, so for mine, I'll say that that is good enough. Maybe one more little tweak just to get some of these flowers included in here. Okay, so you see that you can just move it around by clicking on these handles and either dragging them or pushing them, and just watch your image to get the light where you want it. There is no formula. And what it has done, if we look over here on the right layers panel at this mask that it's created, is you can see where it is blocking the light or where it is showing the light. Now, if you want to, as I said, you can click reverse up here in the options bar, and that would give you a different effect. So again, let me just get rid of that and click and drag again with it reversed. Okay, reverse up here. And that's a different look. So we can just stick with this one if we want and see how that goes. And when I come over here, since there's no handle, I could just click on the radial gradient itself. Okay, so let's stick with that one since we changed it, but you'll see then that changed the mask and how much of the screen is being affected. So where there is black, that screen blend mode is not being shown, and where there's white, it is. All right. So now, let me make this a little bigger so we can see the image better now that we got that set. You can reduce the intensity of the light beam if you want. So if you come to the layers panel again and come across from where it says the screen blend mode to opacity, you can either click on this little down arrow and pull the slider. You watch the image, and that can reduce the opacity, or left click on the word opacity and drag, and that would reduce the opacity. I'm going to leave mine where it is, but you do yours to taste. Another thing you can do is you can duplicate this layer. So this is, I'm going to just label this so we know what we're talking about here. The directional light beam. Okay. So if you want, you can duplicate that layer. And again, you could do a Control or Command J, or left click and drag it to that Add New Layer icon, the box with the plus, to get a duplicate. I'll this time use a Control or Command J. Okay, and so it has created a copy of that prior layer. And if we look, I'll turn the eye icon off on, you can see it's made it brighter. So, and again, once you get that, if you say, okay, I like it brighter, but that's just a little bit much, again, you could then come in and reduce the opacity of that layer if you want by clicking and dragging. All right. So that's an optional step to duplicate for more brightness. Another optional step is to highlight selected areas in the image with more light. So the way I do that is I create a stamp layer. So to do that, come to the bottom of the layers panel, to the Add New Layer icon, that box with the plus, click it. You get an empty layer. It's all just transparency. And I simultaneously press and hold Shift, Control or Command, Alt or Option, and E, and we get this stamp layer here. And that stamp layer is basically a merge of everything that's come before, but without collapsing the layers. So if you want to go backwards, it's easier to do so. So now, again, what I want to do here is to make this also a screen blend mode because we want to brighten again. So right above it with the blend modes, click that down arrow and come down to the second category, it's screen, so you can see how much brighter that makes it. So we're going to do the same thing we did below. We're going to hide that by adding a black layer mask. So again, bottom of the layers panel, add new layer mask, Alt or Option plus click on the layer mask. So now it's hiding that ultra brightness. And then this will be selective brightening. Okay. Now to do it, what I like to do is select the objects that I want to brighten so that I won't be coloring outside the lines, as it were. So let me make this a little bit bigger here so we can see what we're working on. And to do that, I am going to use the Object Selection tool. On the toolbar, it's the box with the arrow going into it. And I'm just going to loosely lasso just outside the area that I want to select. Okay, so that's good enough there, that those are the areas that I want to brighten with this step. Now, to do it, I'm going to be working with a soft, white, low flow brush. So again, in the toolbar, let's switch to the brush tool, which looks like a little paintbrush. So left click on that so the black is active. I want it to be low flow. So as I said before, all these tools have settings. So here's the options for the brush tool. I want to make it low flow because I want to build it up gradually. And I can left click on the word flow and just drag. I think I'm going to do like around 20 to 25%. I think that should be enough. I want to be sure you can see it for the video, so I don't want to go too low. Okay, and then I want to be sure it's a soft brush. So come over here to the upper left on the options bar where you see the brush tip example or preview. Yes, we're on a soft brush, so that's good. And this is the hardness slider. That means hardness would be at full right, softness is at the left. So we got a soft brush, that's good. It's on low flow, but we need it to be on a white foreground color. So you can either click this two-headed arrow to make white the foreground color, or you can use the X key on your keyboard. And we want to be painting on the black mask to reveal the brightness with the mask. So be sure the white frame is around the black mask. So now this white area that you see is how huge the brush is. So I want to make it smaller to paint with. So I'm going to use the left bracket key. I'm just tapping to make the brush tip smaller. The green is just my highlighter to show you where I am, so that's not the brush. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint in the areas where I want some more brightness. Oops, it went back to black for some reason, so we want to be sure it's white. And can you see, let me make this a little bigger. So as I tap, can you see that it is brightening? So you know that effect where you see light coming behind leaves or flower petals and it's got that sort of translucent brightness? That's what I'm trying to simulate here. So each time this green highlighter is moving around, I'm just tapping 1 or 2 times. And I'm thinking about the fact that the light is coming from left to right and at an angle. So where would it be hitting? Not in the shadows behind this, but on this side. And you can make your brush smaller and larger to taste. So larger would be the right bracket key, smaller is the left bracket key. And just to show you, if I click out here, it's not making it brighter. So that's why I like the idea of putting the selection in place, because it keeps where I'm clicking constrained to where I want it. Okay, so let's just say that's probably good enough for the effect. So I will make this smaller again, and I will turn off the marching ants, which is what those little dashed lines are called, with the controller command D. There we go. And so now we brighten that up. So that is all the steps that we needed for the directional lighting. Now, one other thing I see here that you can do if you want to is you see a pretty distinct line here. If you don't like that, you can do a couple things. So let me turn this off first. You can come to the mask And you can, with the properties panel associated with the active layer, the highlighted layer, you can try the feather slider and see, pulling it to the right, if it softens up that line, and do the same thing here. Yeah, so that just softened that line. Another thing that you could do is on the mask, you could also come up to the top of the interface to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, left click on that, and then you could add some blur with the Gaussian blur. And again, you would just do it to taste for your image. There's no formula. So that just softens up what is been drawn on the mask, and it gives it a less distinctive line, which might be more realistic. So those were the steps. It was pretty straightforward to do a directional lighting effect using that gradient tool here. So we have our before image, and we have the directional light from using the radial gradient. So that is the end of demo number 1 on how to create directional relighting without using 3D filters. I'm going to set up for demo number 2, but first, just a quick reminder, if you're new to my channel or you haven't subscribed yet and you want to be notified of my future monthly Photoshop workshops, please click the free subscribe button plus the all bell icon. They've added something new, so you should click all to be sure to get the notifications below this video. And then what will happen is you will get a single notification from YouTube when I release new free content. I never see who's subscribed. You won't get spam from me. If you've already subscribed, there is no need to click again. You only do it one time on one video and you are set. Now, by the way, just something else I want to mention here while we're going through some administrative stuff. In addition to posting the start times for each of the demos in the description below, I will also add links to the stock photos that I use. Hopefully you can access them, but I will include it. Hopefully that will be something you can click on and get to without a subscription. I will also add links to my 2 older relighting videos that I mentioned at the beginning in case you kept release 22.2 or prior CC releases of Photoshop. You can keep multiple releases on your computer. You just cannot use them all at the same time. But those prior or older videos of mine include using the 3D lighting effects in Photoshop that are now gone. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to pause and set up for demo number 2. Hold on again. This is demo number 2. And in this one, we're going to see how to create a lens flare. Now, this image here is another stock photo. This one is from the company called FreePic. So again, I will try to include the link in the description below the video. Hopefully you can access it. Now with the lens flare, what this effect is going to simulate is the light scattering or flaring, as it's called, in a lens that causes haze or other artifacts like rings or spots to appear in an image. Now usually you get that flaring effect when you're shooting towards a bright light source like the sun or artificial lights. And since the camera angle here is shooting towards these bright lights in this night scene, then I think it's reasonable to assume that you could have a flare being created back there. So that's what we're going to do. All right, so again, be sure your image is opened into Photoshop. It's opened already as a background layer. And as usual, we're going to duplicate it to work on a copy. So we can left click and drag it to the bottom of the layers panel to the add new layer icon for a copy, or on that background layer, press and hold Control or Command and J to jump up that copy. All right, so the first thing we're going to do here beyond that is to add a new empty layer. So bottom of the layers panel, add new layer icon, that box with the plus, we have an empty layer. What we're going to do is fill that with black. So top of the interface to the edit menu, left click, and we're going to come down to where it says fill. So edit, fill, left click, and we get this dialog box for filling, and this gives you the option of what to fill it with. And as I said, we want to fill it with black. So there's a down arrow here, and you have different choices of different things. I like to, when I want a color, just choose the actual color. So there's black, that's all we have to set, and left click OK. And now we have a layer filled with black. What I want to do is convert this layer to a smart object. So right click over in the empty area, come down where it says convert to smart object, and left click. Okay, and you know it's a smart object because it's added this little icon here. And this is going to be our lens flare layer. The reason that I say to convert to a smart object is that you'll see what happens. After we work with the filter, it will return some sub layers too, and it will retain the settings that you use. So you don't have to start all over again. If you change your mind and you just want to tweak some of your settings, you can go back in where you were, back to where the settings were, just pick up and make some changes and then save again. So that's the benefit of using the smart object. All right, so once you get that smart object set, we're going to go up to the top of the interface to the filter menu. Come down to render, so filter, render, and then fly out to the very bottom. Filter, render, lens flare, left click. Okay, so again, you get the dialog box that pops up that says you're going to be working with lens flares. And you have this preview box, a brightness control, and different types of lenses that produce different types of lens flares. So let me just actually start from the bottom up here in terms of how I'm going to approach it. So you can decide what type of flare you want. So this is the flare that they have that simulates what you'd get with a 50 to 300 millimeter zoom lens. You could also try the 35 millimeter prime, just left click in the little circle, and you can see that this changed. You can watch again as I read it how the flare changes, a 105 millimeter prime. Okay, and then there's a movie prime. So if you're doing something sort of cinematic, then you might want to work with that. That's sort of different. But I think I'll just use the one on top just because it's convenient and it's there. Okay, so you adjust your lens flare to taste, all right? Then you also adjust the brightness to taste. So let me just show you. If you go all the way down here, there's like virtually no brightness or flare, and you can go to a totally blown out sun if you want. Okay, so that's just something to keep in mind. So you decide where along the spectrum you want to be, and I'm just sort of looking at mine to see where I want it to be. I want it to be enough that you can see it, but not too crazy. All right, so I think I will leave mine there. Now, the other thing you can probably see here is that it's just in a fixed position. So if you want to, you can click on this flare and move it around to wherever you want it in your image. So just click on that and drag, okay? And look at what happens. So if I drag it up to the upper right, look where the secondary flares are. Now they're going diagonally down towards the left corner. If I pull it down towards the right corner, they go up, so the secondary lens flares will alter based on where you put the flare. Okay, so just click and move that to wherever you'd like yours. I'm going to guess mine based on where the lights were, and mine somewhere in this general area here would probably be good for mine. Okay, so after you've repositioned it and you've gotten the kind of flare and the brightness, then you just click OK to accept it. And there we go. So now we have our lens flare with the secondary flares. And if you look back in the layers panel over here on the right, it's what I said. So there is the layer. By having the smart object, you get a mask associated with it. And then you have the lens flare is what we used. Now, if you double left click on the words lens flare, as I said, it takes you back to your settings. So that's, again, a benefit of using the smart object. So if you decide, oh, I should have had more brightness or less brightness, it just makes it very convenient to go back in and make some settings changes. All right, so now If you don't like these secondary flares, which I don't really want for mine, you can get rid of them. So the way I handle it is I will add a new empty layer above the lens flare. So bottom of the layers panel, add new layer icon, that box with the plus, and we have the empty layer. And this is going to be my layer to remove the secondary flares. Okay, and the way I like to do it is I'm going to work with the remove tool. So on the toolbar, it's the icon that looks like a band-aid with little magical sparkles next to it. So I'm going to left click to make sure that's black and active and that I'm on this. I wouldn't do it on this layer because if you want to mask anything, you can do it if it's on its own layer. Okay, so again, that little tiny white circle inside my highlighter pointer there is the actual remove tool. So I want to use the right bracket key and make it bigger so I can get rid of some of these secondary flares. So I'm just going to click and drag over them and then wait for it to process. Okay, so you can see it's removed them. And I honestly don't mind this other one up here because remember in that scene, there were all sorts of bright lights up there. Now, let me just come back to, well, before I do that, what you have to do is attach this removed flares to the main lens flare. And the way I do that is with a clipping mask. So to do that, I press Alt or Option key, keep it depressed, and I come with my pointer, my cursor, in on the lens flare layer, and then keeping that Alt or Option key depressed, just slowly, gradually move up to the dividing line between those two layers there. Did you see what popped up? So you should get this as you get to the dividing line, a little box with that down arrow that says, okay, you are clipping or attaching what you did on the higher layer to the lower layer so that they work with each other. So left click, and now it is clipped. The removed flare is clipped to the main flare layer. And you can see the little down arrow that's been added shows you that this is clipped to what's below it. Okay, so now what I can do is come back to my flare layer and I can get rid of I like to always go back to the lasso as my neutral tool. On that actual lens flare layer, what you can do is reduce the opacity, top of the layers panel over here, and just do a quick look to see if, yeah, so my flare is where I like it. If you are not seeing yours where you want it to, then I'd say put the opacity back up and go back into, let's just do it and show here. If we wanted it a little bit higher, you could move it up, click OK, and it's been repositioned. All right. So now we're still on this lens flare layer, and what we want to do is add, because we want to be able to see the scene, we want to add a blend mode. So in this blend mode box, come to this down arrow, and I'm going to look for the linear dodge. Here it is, linear dodge. Okay, so we've added a linear dodge add in blend mode to the lens flare layer so that we can see the content from below. So now we have our lens flare positioned over in this area where we want it. Now, if you use different kinds of blend modes, you will get different looks. So you can watch what happens with the lens flare over here, and I'll just read off to you some of the other blend modes that might be good for something like this. So one of them you could try would be lighten. Okay, it's a little softer. You could also try screen. And then I'll go back and use the one that I used, which is the linear dodge. It's got a little bit more punch to it. So you just decide for your image how soft or how intense you want it. Now, the other thing you could do is potentially, again, lower the opacity if you want to. Also, optionally, if you want a softer bloom or a hazier look to this flare that you created, as an optional step, you can do the following. Click on this top layer here if you did any removing. If you didn't, then you don't have it. Hold down the Shift key and then click on the lens flare layer. So you're collecting both of these, and this subsumes all of this. Come to the bottom of the layers panel to this icon that looks like a little manila folder, which is the group layer thing. So left click, and you've created a group. So you can double click on that word if you want to label it, and this is Lens Flare 1. Okay, now it's for tidiness sake, so you don't get tangled in too many different layers and indented layers. You have not lost your layers. If you click on that little right-facing caret, you'll see your layers are all still there, okay? So it's just for the convenience of less to look at and less confusion. Okay, so what you can do is duplicate this lens flare layer. So Control or Command J, or drag it to the bottom to the Add New Layer icon, and you see you get a lens flare copy. And I'll just call this lens flare 2. So we can keep them separate. And again, it has all those same layers because it copied what was in that group. Now, this is pretty intense here for me. So I think one of the things I wanted to do was soften it. So I think what I want to do here is be sure I'm on the lens flare layer in this second copied group. And I'm going to come to the top of the interface to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And I'm just going to soften that up so we get a little bit more soft flare out of it. And you might not like that look for this, but just do whatever you feel is right for your image. I'm just showing you the processes because this is not going to be your image in any case. And I'm just looking to see when to taste. I like whatever I'm seeing here. So I'm sort of liking it once it gets near 100, but it doesn't let me stop there. So I'll just hit 100 and leave it there. Okay, so then once you get the softness the way you like, click OK. And then the other thing you can do is reduce the opacity on either one of these layers. And since this is pretty intense, I definitely want to lower that. So I'm going to come across from that blend mode to opacity. I'm going to left click on the word opacity and just drag. That's pretty nice. I'm watching the image, not the number, because it's not a formula. Yeah, so I'll leave mine there, or just a little bit more, but basically for mine, yeah, now that's too much. In the 40 to 45 range, I think is good. So I'm going to leave mine there. Okay, so that is it for adding the lens flare. So we've got it collapses so it looks less intimidating. We've got the primary lens flare. We removed, at least I, for my taste, wanted to remove the secondary lens flares. So we saw how to do that using the remove tool on an empty layer, but then making the other adjustments on the actual lens flare layers. And then if we want a more blooming, see, look at the image as I click that second lens flare off, you can see. So if you want more glare and more softness, then duplicate and go through the Gaussian blur and then reducing the opacity to taste. So that is the end of demo number 2. So let me just show you, we went from this to this. So it can add some personality or effect to an image of yours if you want it. I can think of beach scenes where you might want to add a nice lens flare because it would add an interesting effect with the bright sunlight and things like that. So different situations where it might add an interesting, if you're working with models or if you're working with brides, you might want to have some interesting lighting effects behind them. So just something to keep in mind. All right, so that is the end of demo number 2, which is how to add a lens flare. So again, I'm going to pause and set up for demo number 3. This is demo number 3, and in this demo I'm going to show how to create a lit lantern look. And I'm actually going to show two different approaches. So one will be manual, where you go through using all the different tools, and then one will be generative AI. I realize not everybody has lots of AI credits, and some people, I believe, don't have access to the partner models for generative AI, or at least they'd have to buy a lot of credits to be able to access them, at least at this point in time. So I want to be able to show you options here so you can do it manually if you don't have the credits or the access to the AI models that I'll show. Okay, so again, I think this was a free pick image here. So if I can include it, I will. Unless, I'm trying to remember, I might have generated this one from AI, speaking of AI, because I couldn't find what I wanted. So if you don't see this one, you'll know that's why, if it was something I generated. Okay, so now this creating a lit lantern or a lit light bulb sort of a look is replacing the old 3D, what they called omnidirectional lighting effect in Photoshop. So as I mentioned way up front and along the way, the 3D effects are no longer in Photoshop. So there was a tool or a filter called Omni or omnidirectional lighting effect. So what I'm showing you here is it can go in all directions. It's not directional like the first demo that I showed. So that's the Omni part of it. So I would say this effect could be used by anyone wanting to add light to street lamps like this one here, or to house lights. If you're working in Photoshop and creating a day to night look, it could be very useful. And also, I would think that real estate photographers, typically like to have things lit up so they look better and more attractive. So I would think real estate photographers would love these techniques as well. And again, I think I'm talking too much here, so I'm going to take a drink of water. Hold on. Okay, so I've got my image opened as a background layer. We're going to duplicate that and work on it as a copy. Left click and drag to the Add New Layer icon, bottom of the Layers panel, or Control or Command J to jump that up as a copy. So now what we want to do is create a new layer. So top of the interface, go to the Layer menu, left click, and we're going to go to Layer, New Layer. Layer, New Layer, left click, and we get this dialog box. And what we want to do here is, you can just leave that, you can name it if you want, but I don't usually bother. We want to choose the mode, and we want to set the mode to color dodge. So click on that down arrow and find color dodge. It's in this third group here. Left click, so we got color dodge. And then you want to check this box that says fill with neutral colors. Just left click in that box, and black is fine. So then we click OK, and we have a new black layer. So now we want to use a soft white brush to create that lit light bulb. You know how bright they are inside the lantern. So I'm going to go to the brush tool on the toolbar, which looks like a paintbrush. Left click to be sure it's active and there's black behind it. And then I want it to be a soft brush, and I want it to be a soft airbrush. So again, as I mentioned earlier, if you listen to the other videos first, if not, then every tool in the toolbar has its own specific options or settings. So we go to the options bar across the top of this workspace to find out what the settings should be. So I start with the brush tip or the brush preview, whatever you want to call it. And I want a airbrush effect for mine. So I think I'll just go to this little bit larger one here. So here are soft brushes, here are airbrushes. So I'm going to choose the 100 pixel airbrush there. Okay, and then I don't want to do this at full intensity. I do want to be sure it's soft. So again, we look at the hardness slider here in the brush settings or the brush choice box here. And hardness means if it's hard, it will be at the far right. If it's at the far left, that handle, then it means it's soft, and that's where we want it. Okay, opacity, I'm going to lower it by quite a bit, so maybe by half. Let's see if that'll be enough. So I'm clicking and dragging on the word opacity to lower the opacity. I'll leave it at 49, 50%. And then if you prefer, you can click on that down arrow and just pull a handle versus dragging across the word. And then I also want to do low flow. So left click on that, maybe 20 to 25. Maybe I'll do 20. So it doesn't build up too much. If you're working with a stylus and tablet, which is what I typically do, but for demos, I tend to use the mouse, then you can be sure the pen pressure is on, but otherwise that can be off. Okay, so we've got our soft airbrush set at least around 50% opacity and 20 to 25% flow. You can experiment for your taste, and left click over in this options bar just to close that box up again. And you want to be sure that we're using white. So white needs to be your foreground color from the bottom of your toolbars. You can either click on that double-headed arrow or press the X key, and that will alternate between the two. So white foreground color. Okay, so now, again, the little black circle inside my highlighter indicator is the actual brush. So I'm going to use the right bracket key and make my brush bigger, and that's too big. So what I'm making it the size of now is what I want to represent the light bulb, okay, and the light bulb effect. So I'm going to just position that where I want and the size I want. And you might say, well, is she making it so big? You might want two bulbs. So you alternate and do the size that you like for you. This is just a process, and then you tweak it to taste. So I'm just going to left click a few times till I see something that to me looks like a lit light bulb. Okay, so that lit up, so you can see that there, okay? All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to maybe label this so we know that that's the lit light bulb. And typically light bulbs do sort of blow the highlights, so that's fine if you do that. You could do it even more if you wanted to. So the next thing I'm going to do is create a stamp layer above this. So bottom of the layers panel, add new layer icon, the box with the plus, there's the empty layer, and I'm going to use that claw maneuver that I've told you. You simultaneously press and hold Shift, Control or Command, Alt or Option, and E, and that creates a stamp layer. It's a stamp of everything that's come before without collapsing it. Okay, so we have our stamp layer. So the next step I want to do in this lantern is to create kind of a more of a warm surrounding glow. So what I want to do is put another empty layer above this stamp layer. Bottom of the layers panel, add new layer icon, click, and we have the empty layer there. Okay, so now what I want to do is set this to linear light blend mode. Your light, where are you? Here we are. Okay, so we have the linear light blend mode that is on this empty layer, and this is going to be the warm glow in the lantern surrounding the light bulb. Okay, so now as I said, you can also, if you want to, I'm stopping because I'm thinking of other ways to approach this. Another blend mode you could use is the linear dodge one that we used in the previous demo, linear dodge right there, instead of linear light. So if you use the linear light, I think it will be a little bit of a darker, more visible glow. If you want a paler light, then I'd say use the linear dodge add blend mode. Okay, so gathering my thoughts here. All right, so now again, we're going to work with a soft, round brush on this. So again, we have the brush tool active on the toolbar. Come back up to the upper left to the brush tip presets. And this time I think I'm going to work with the just plain old round brush instead of the airbrush. So again, I'll just get sort of a medium-sized one there. Again, I want to keep the opacity at about 50%, so 49 is fine. You can do it in that general range. And then I actually want to increase the flow a bit for this versus the light bulb. So I might come up to the 30 to 40% range for this. So maybe I'll split the difference and do 35. Okay. So we have soft, round, white brush, opacity around 50%, but do it to taste, and flow in like the 30 to 40%, and again, to taste. So now what I want to do is size the brush to fit inside the lantern. Now again, to taste, you might want to have some spill of the warm glow. So let's say that this lantern was next to a brick or a stone building. You might want to have some of the warm glow come out and reflect onto the building. So then you would make your brush a different size than if you want it all contained. So you just adjust it to taste. Okay, so mine, again, the brush is that little tiny black circle. So I'm going to use the right bracket key and tap to make this to kind of fill this lantern. Now it is spilling out, so just, you know, as I said, you can either have it spill or you can have it contained. I'll show you contained just so you have the option of knowing how to do it. So back over to the upper left, down arrow, see this little icon? That's representing this round brush. And these circles are handles that you can use to adjust the shape of the brush, and the arrow you can readjust the position of the brush. So if I want this a little bit less round and a little more oval to fit in that lantern, I would click on these handles and then just squeeze, so press it up. And then if I want that oval shape to be more vertical, I would click on this arrowhead and tilt it up. Okay, well, I'll make it a little crooked there, but whatever. So then I could see I can maybe even squeeze it a little bit more for mine. Oh no, I'm getting squeeze anxiety here. Okay, that's good. All right, so once you get it in the position and the shape that you want, then you can click here on the options bar to close that. Now we need to put our colors into that lantern. So we're going to work with the color picker at the bottom of the toolbar. What I like to do if I'm working with this manually is to combine 3 colors just to give it a little bit more dimension. So the first color I'm going to work with in here to paint on with this paintbrush tool is a dark orange. So I will left click on the foreground box to bring up the color picker. Let me move this over so we can see. And I will click on one of these little handles and just slide it to the color that I want to use. So I want to work in the oranges. Yeah, so I'm going to choose a darker orange. And if you'll notice on these color pickers, if you're not familiar with it, to the right is more saturated, to the left is less saturated, to the top is lighter, and to the bottom is darker. So you can just choose what you want and whatever you like. And wherever you place or click to place to pick a color, that's what will show up in the upper box here. So let's just say that's a good dark orange, left click, okay. And you can see that that is now the new, over here on the right, the new foreground color is that orange. So with that brush we've just constructed, we can just click a few times till you get the amount of color that you want in there. I'll say that's good enough for that. Maybe one more just for good luck. Okay. And then next I'm going to click on that color picker, foreground color again. This time I will use a more medium or a lighter orange. Okay, so we had the dark orange, now we're doing a lighter orange. So again, I just clicked where I wanted it after I moved with the handle, and you see how much lighter that is than the previous color. Click OK when you get what you like. and then just do a couple clicks or whatever of that, however many you want. Okay, and then the final color that I like to work with is yellow. So repeat the process. Left click on the color picker, grab the little handle, drag it up to the yellow range, and then just pick a yellow that you like wherever you like. It could be wherever you want. And then click OK. So now your brush is loaded with yellow. And same thing, maybe a couple clicks will do it, depending on what you want. There we go. See, so it just adds some dimension to have the three different oranges and yellow there, the two different oranges and the yellow. And again, if you want it to not spill as much, then just adjust your brush so it has a little bit more hardness. It's something you just do to taste. Now, if that's too much for you, with that layer still active, come across from the blend mode to opacity, and you could lower the layer opacity. So just click and drag. Okay, so you can see, you can light it as much or as little as you want. Okay, so that is mine. So as I said, this is a manual process, and that was for one lantern. So for each, let me blow this up so you can see this scene. So for each of these lanterns to be lit up, and there might be some around the corner here too, you would have to repeat that same process for each of these lanterns. Now, if you know how to create actions, you might be able to record an action for the first one and then just build in stops so that you can adjust the sizing where you need to adjust the sizing. But if you don't know how to do something in that record an action, then you're going to have to manually go through and those same steps for each of these lanterns to light them up. So that is, let me show you then here where we've gone from the original to the lit lantern using this manual approach. Now, the other thing that we can do is, as I said up front, use generative AI if you have the credits and if you have access to the partner models that I'm going to recommend be used. So let me turn off those. Let me return to the default, and let me put these back to the, it's like, I like to treat this like a camera where I like to set it back to my default setting. So if I pick it up in a hurry and start using it, I don't wonder why something isn't working right. And that lasso tool is one of my base settings. Okay, so we're going to come back to the background copy and make sure that's active. So I've turned off the visibility for the manual. In fact, let me just group these. I'm going to do it a different way. Turn those back on. And this is the manual. Right, so that's a manual light bulb lighting effect. And I will collapse this and I will turn that off. All right, so then we come back to the background copy, and now we're going to try approach number 2, which is using generative AI. And I always just sort of hope that things work because you never know what generative AI is going to do. The reason I like the idea of the generative is it's definitely faster if you have the credits and the access to the partner models, because you can take care of everything at once versus having to go through each of these individual lanterns or lights and light them. So with that layer active, what I want to do is select all. So I will do a Control or Command A and the letter A. And what that gives me is a selection of the entire image. We've got the marching ants around the entire image. So that's what the generative AI will be looking at and working with. So once you have that selection, you'll come up to your contextual taskbar. Mine is docked up here. Yours might be someplace else. If you don't see it, come to the Windows menu at the top left, come down to where it says contextual taskbar and click it to open it and make it active, okay? And again, you can dock it in different places. I find it annoying when it's over the image, so I like mine docked up here. Left click on the generative fill box there, and it gives you a box where you can type a prompt of what you want the generative AI to do. So for mine, right, let's see how this works. Okay, I'm going to say add soft, glowing, warm light filling the glass lanterns, but don't reposition the lanterns. The AI has a habit of shifting things and moving things, and so what is always recommended, and you'll see it in the tooltips probably that come up when this starts to process, is try to be as explicit as possible about what you want the AI to do and what you don't want it to do. And if it has a habit of moving things around, which it does, or altering them, tell it explicitly not to alter or move or reposition what you're doing. Sometimes it won't do it if you skip that, sometimes it will. Okay, so next, after you get your prompt, come across, you see this G here, left click on that box. Here are the models that are your options. There are the Adobe models at the top, Firefly 1 and 3, at least at this point in time. There's probably more going to be coming as time passes. Do not use these Firefly prompts with a prompt. Do not use these Firefly models with a prompt. I have had really bad luck with that. I think they're great when you're doing content-aware fill kinds of things, but not so great for prompts. So for now, at least, rely on the partner models. I think you can do pretty well for what this is trying to achieve, either with the Flux context or with Gemini. So I will work with Gemini 3, which is called Nano Banana Pro. So be sure that's highlighted, and that's what that G represents, is the Gemini. And then come across and then just click Generate and wait for it to process. Yeah, see, and it gives you tips in here. It's going to take a little while, and then I just always pray, since it's generative AI and I don't know what it's going to do. What I want it to do is recognize the lanterns and fill them with light. And it did it. So that's pretty nice. And I think, you know, it looks, I think, better than the one I did manually, but, you know, either one is passable. You get the same effect. Now, once you use the generative AI, let me show you over on the right in the properties panel associated with this layer. So here's our layer that we used, and associated with that in the properties panel is this here. Now what you'll notice is with the partner models for generative AI, you only get a single variation. With Firefly, you get 3 variations. If you like this, and it's pretty close, but it just wasn't exactly what you wanted, so you want to generate and try again, you would come here, and where you see those 3 dots, left click, and you could try to generate something similar. I'm not going to take the time to do that now because I think it's fine. Also, you'll notice here in this box, it'll show you in the properties panel that we were working with Gemini 3 Nano Banana. So if it wasn't exactly what you wanted, you have the option with this down arrow of trying a different model. So you could try a different model in the same prompt if you wanted to. If you think that the prompt was kind of a little off from what you wanted to be done, then you can type in here and modify this prompt. And then once you get those things set, you can click generate. So again, you don't even have to click similar. You could just try generate again and see if it gives you something different. So those are the options after you have generated something. Now let me just show you again before and after. And see, watch the image. You'll see it did shift it slightly, even though I asked it not to, but at least it didn't go as radically. Sometimes it would shift this whole upper area sideways and it wouldn't line up with the lantern anymore if you didn't tell it not to move. So it's a good idea to do that. So that is the end of demo number 3, which is the final demo in this part 1 video. And this was how to add a omnidirectional lit light bulb effect. So to recap what I covered in this video, this workshop is intended to update the aspects of my 2024 workshops that showed how to relight images in Photoshop. But viewers had written in to me to ask for a new set of tutorials because Adobe removed the 3D lighting effects filters in the later half of 2024. So if you don't have Photoshop CC release 22.2, which was supposedly the most stable version of the 3D effects, or an earlier version than that, then these new workflows that I showed you in this video are a way to achieve similar looks to the discontinued 3D lighting effects. In this video, I demonstrated 3 step-by-step relighting workflows. So it was a directional light, lens flare, and these lit light bulb sort of look. But keep your eye out for part 2 of this set. So in it, I'm going to feature how to create a spotlight effect, and we'll give you the option of doing it with or without the dust effect in it, and then how to create cast shadows that you'll probably need when you do relight a scene. Now, again, the proviso with all of this is feel free to adjust my workflows to your needs. So keep in mind where I've only shown a single lighting effect, you can repeat the process to have multiple lights in the same scene if you want to. You don't have to just be stuck with a single light. Also, again, different opacities, different brightnesses, just experiment with it, okay? You can use these relighting techniques, I'd say, in different genres of photography. So portraits, still lifes, landscape, product commercial, real estate, bridal, whatever. If you didn't have the light that you wanted, or you want to beef up your image, give it just a little bit more impact with some extra lighting, these tools are very useful for that. So have fun experimenting, and I hope it will be useful to you to have these non-3D lighting effects approaches and workflows. Take care.